Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Venezuela's opposition leader Maria Corina Machado hails Trump's capture of Maduro as a huge step for humanity in her first comments after the military action. Vows to return home as soon as possible. Leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, Britain and Denmark issue a joint statement saying Greenland belongs to its people and only Denmark and Greenland can decide on their relations. Attacks against minorities remain unabated in Bangladesh. A Hindu man is shot dead and a Hindu woman is allegedly gang raped, raising law and order fears before national elections next month. And Volodymyr Zelensky arrives at the Élysée Palace in Paris for Coalition of the Willing Nations talks hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron to finalize security guarantees for Kyiv. Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado on Monday said that she will be returning to Venezuela soon. In her first public comment since a social media post over the weekend, when the U.S. military captured Nicolas Maduro, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, vowed to return to her country as soon as possible. She welcomed the U.S. actions as a huge step for humanity, for freedom and human dignity. Speaking to Fox News, Machado openly rejected the country's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, saying she is one of the main architects of torture, persecution, corruption, narco-trafficking. Machado also vowed to turn Venezuela into the energy hub of the Americas and promised to bring millions of Venezuelans back home who have been forced to flee the country. Colombia on Tuesday affirmed its commitment to collaborating with the United States in the fight against drug trafficking, using American intelligence and technology to enhance efforts. Colombia's Interior Minister Armando Benedetti in a video said Justice Minister Andres Idarraga that Bogota's anti-drug operations would target drug laboratories, criminal organizations and their camps.
El gobierno de Colombia.
The Colombian government, through the Interior Ministry and Justice Ministry, informs the United States government, through one of their intelligence agencies, that we will continue coordinating and cooperating in the fight against drug trafficking, based on intelligence and their technology to destroy laboratories and criminal structure and their camps.
La lucha contra el narcotráfico.
The fight against drug trafficking must continue to be waged jointly with technology, with all the advances in cooperation that the US government can give us. We will continue to emphasize the fight against this scourge, particularly on the Colombian-Venezuelan border. The purpose is to continue walking hand in hand against this scourge that causes so much damage to both countries.
The United Nations on Tuesday voiced deep concern over the dramatic U.S. operation in Venezuela, warning that it clearly undermined a fundamental principle of international law. Ravina Shamdasani, spokesperson of the UN Human Rights Office, told reporters in Geneva, and I quote, "States must not threaten or use force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state," end quote. Her comments came after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were forcibly taken by U.S. commandos in the early hours of Saturday amid airstrikes on the Venezuelan capital, backed by warplanes and heavy naval deployment. Shamdasani dismissed U.S. justifications of Venezuelan government's long-standing and appalling human rights violations for the raid. Now, the ousted Venezuelan leader Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty to drug and weapons charges in a New York courtroom. The appearance comes 2 days after the United States captured Maduro and his wife Celia Flores in a military attack. Meanwhile, Delcy Rodriguez has been sworn in as Venezuela's president. A report.
Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro made his first U.S. court appearance in New York, pleading not guilty to federal charges. He also insisted he's still in charge as Venezuela's president. Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, also pleaded not guilty to charges in the same hearing. Maduro is facing charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapon charges. The judge ordered both to remain behind bars and set a new hearing date of March 17th. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefed members of Congress regarding the U.S. military intervention in Venezuela, prompting a divided response from lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the administration's plans, calling them vague and unsatisfying.
Well, this briefing, while very extensive and long, posed far more questions than it ever answered. Their plan for the U.S. running Venezuela is vague, based on wishful thinking, and unsatisfying.
The U.S. military operation in Venezuela was a decisive and justified action. Nicolas Maduro is responsible for the deaths of untold thousands of Americans after years of trafficking illegal drugs and violent cartel members into our country.
House Speaker Mike Johnson defended the operation, citing the detention of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as a victory. U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said the Trump administration was misleading Americans by portraying the operation as a counter-narcotics or law enforcement action. Venezuelan's parliament swore in Delcy Rodriguez as interim president 2 days after U.S. forces seized her predecessor, Nicolas Maduro. Following the swearing ceremony of interim leader Delcy Rodriguez, thousands of protesters gathered demanding the release of ousted leader Nicolas Maduro. To discuss the U.S. operation in Venezuela and the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, the United Nations Security Council held a meeting in New York. During the meet, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for respect of nations' political independence following a U.S. military operation in Venezuela. At the emergency UNSC meeting, the United States rejected accusations of aggression against Venezuela, saying the operation was a law enforcement action tied to long-standing criminal charges. While Venezuela's UN ambassador Samuel Moncada said international norms were at risk and also urged the Security Council to demand that Washington release Maduro and his wife. In a series of shock announcements over the weekend, Trump then declared that the United States was in charge and intends to take control of Venezuela's huge but decrepit oil industry. President Trump also dismissed the idea of Venezuela having new elections in the next month. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, Britain, and Denmark have issued a joint statement on Tuesday reaffirming that Greenland belongs to its people and that only Denmark and Greenland can decide on matters concerning their relations. The declaration comes in response to renewed interest expressed by U.S. President Donald Trump in acquiring the autonomous Arctic territory. The leaders highlighted that security in the Arctic must be achieved collectively in close cooperation with NATO allies, including the United States. They further stressed the importance of upholding the principles of the United Nations Charter, including sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of borders. French President Emmanuel Macron has welcomed Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney in Paris ahead of a coalition of the willing meeting. Key Ukrainian allies are meeting with the top U.S. envoys in Paris on Tuesday to discuss security guarantees as they press ahead on U.S. brokered plans to end the conflict with Russia. The summit of the group of Ukraine allies, dubbed the Coalition of the Willing, is the latest of several meetings planned for the new year. Representatives of 35 countries, including 27 heads of state, have gathered in Paris, with the French presidency saying the meeting aims to show the alignment between Washington, Kyiv, and European allies on security guarantees for Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are attending the meeting of the coalition. An advisor of French President Emmanuel Macron said the new meeting is the culmination of efforts launched by Donald Trump's arrival at the White House to prevent the United States from abandoning Ukraine. Let's get you an update on the Swiss fire tragedy now. Swiss local authorities admitted on Tuesday that fire safety inspections had not been carried out for the past 5 years at a bar where 40 people died and dozens were injured and burned in a New Year blaze. 5 days after the disaster, Crans-Montana Mayor Nicolas Ferraud said that periodic inspections were not conducted between 2020 and 2025, adding that he deeply regrets it. He further added that the soundproof foam on its ceiling was considered acceptable at the time and a fire alarm was not required due to the bar's size, while sparkler candles have now been banned inside the town's venues. The authorities have said they believe the fire started when people celebrating New Year raised champagne bottles with sparklers attached, setting light to sound-insulating foam on the ceiling of the bar's basement.
Periodic inspections were not carried out between 2020 and 2025. The municipal council became aware of the situation after reviewing the documents submitted to the public prosecutor's office last weekend. We deeply regret this.
Now, despite the German economy struggling to get out of its weakness of several years, not all Germans are doing that bad. Wealth is up, according to a new statistic. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and is now joining me from Berlin. Good evening to you, Lars. What can you tell us about these new data pieces?
Thanks for having me. Yes, indeed, it might sound a bit surprising. We've seen 3 years of an economy between recession and stagnation. We've hardly seen any growth, and yet wealth is up. And the headline number is something to behold. Germans have a private wealth of more than 10 trillion euros. If you want to write that down, that's a 1 by 13 zeros, and that's the private wealth held by German households. It has grown steadily over the years, even through the last 3 years that have been economically challenging. This past year, it has apparently grown by around 6%. That is according to the DZ Bank, the bank that's been keeping track of that number for decades. The economists there also think that the trend will remain intact in 2026. They're expecting wealth to grow by another 5%.
But Lars, where's that growth coming from when the economy hasn't been doing all that well?
That's a great question because we're dealing with a very German phenomenon here. Germans are very fiscally conservative. They put a lot of money aside. Their savings rate stands at 10.3%. Which means for every 100 euros they have, they put just over 10%, 10 euro into their savings account. Seen on a monthly basis, that means that 270 euros are being put into every German household's account. Well, obviously that's on average. So this savings rate is a lot higher than in other countries. But as great as that sounds, it's not only positive because many Germans apparently park their money in savings accounts with very little interest. So while money accumulates there, it doesn't grow, and that is very different in some other countries, like the United States, for example, where a lot more money is actively invested, and while that is more risky, it also allows for more growth.
Thanks, Lars, for that update. Very interesting data indeed. Now, violence linked to protests in Iran is intensifying. At least 25 people have now been killed as demonstrations continue to spread with no signs of easing. What began as protests over economic hardship has widened into open political dissent, with demonstrators in some areas protesting against Iran's clerical leadership. US President Donald Trump has warned that Washington could step in if Iranian security forces open fire or target protesters. Tehran has rejected the warning outright, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei vowing that Iran will not yield to the enemy. Now, still to come in this edition of DD India Live. External Affairs Minister Dr. H. Shankar calls on Luxembourg's Prime Minister Luke Frieden and conveys warm greetings on behalf of Prime Minister Modi. And this month's Australian Open prize pool is hiked by 16% to volley past $75 million in total.
This week on Defense Dynamics, India is reshaping its military structure with Bhaira formations. What are ramjet-powered artillery shells? And how India's rocket punch gets an emergency boost with Suryastra. As Europe and Israel turn to India for industrial depth, my take explains the why. Watch Defense Dynamics this Wednesday at 8 PM IST only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. In Bangladesh, a 40-year-old Hindu man, owner of a grocery shop, has been murdered after unidentified attackers struck him with a sharp weapon in Narsingdi city. The murder of grocery trader Moni Chakrabarti has increased fear and anger across Bangladesh. Chakrabarti's death has come amid a worrying series of killings of people belonging to the Hindu minority community in recent weeks. Moni's killing raises serious concerns about public safety, minority protection and law and order ahead of general elections next month. According to Palash police officials, Moni Chakrabarti was attacked and killed at Charsingdur Bazaar in Palash Upazila on Monday. Police and locals said Moni was returning home after closing his shop when unknown attackers struck him with a sharp locally made weapon. He was rushed to the nearby hospital where doctors declared him dead. And fear has further mounted after another incident on the 5th of January where a Hindu businessman and journalist Rana Pratap was shot dead in public at Kopalia Bazaar in Jashore. Moni and Rana's killings have come while the country is still shaken by two other brutal incidents. On the 18th of December, Machado Das, a garment worker in Maiman Singh, was beaten to death over blasphemy allegations. His body was later tied to a tree and set alight. Deepu had been working at a garment factory for 2 years. Less than 2 weeks later, on the 31st of December, businessman Khokon Chandra Das was stabbed and set on fire in Shariatpur. He died 3 days later while receiving treatment in Dhaka. And atrocity against a Hindu woman has also come to light in Bangladesh. A Hindu woman has alleged that she was gang raped, tied to a tree and brutally tortured in Kaliganj Upazila of Janaida district on Monday. Officials said the incident took place on the 31st of December, but the complaint was filed later as the victim was undergoing treatment in hospital. The woman was rescued in a critically injured condition and admitted. One accused has been arrested and the police are continuing the probe. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met with Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Luc Frieden, on Tuesday. During the meeting, Dr. Jaishankar conveyed the warm greetings of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders discussed the growing cooperation between India and Luxembourg in areas such as financial services, investment, technology and innovation. Dr. Jaishankar praised Luxembourg's role in strengthening India-EU relations. During his visit, the External Affairs Minister will also engage with senior leadership of Luxembourg and interact with members of the Indian community in the country. India's Minister for Electronics and Information Technology, Ashwini Vaishnaw, addressed Regional AI Impact Summit 2026 in the Western Indian city of Jaipur on Tuesday. Speaking on the occasion, the minister highlighted the importance of AI in our day-to-day lives. The minister further mentioned that to integrate AI smoothly into our lives, AI mission has been established.
AI को अच्छे से भारत में डेवलप करने के लिए, हमारे नागरिकों के उपयोग में लाने के लिए माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने बहुत एक क्लियर विजन हम सबके सामने रखा। उसका पहला प्रिंसिपल है टेक्नोलॉजी को डेमोक्रेटाइज करना, यानी हर एक व्यक्ति को टेक्नोलॉजी की उपलब्धता हो, भारत में टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप हो सके, आत्मनिर्भर भारत के टेक्नोलॉजी के गोल्स हम पूरे कर सके। इस पूरे प्रेरणादायी विजन को लेकर एआई मिशन ने और मंत्रालय ने कई अच्छे एक्सपर्ट्स के साथ बातचीत करने के बाद में एआई मिशन की रचना की थी।
Union Minister for New and Renewable Energy Prasar Joshi and Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways Nitin Gadkari on Tuesday took a joint ride in the Toyota Mirai fuel cell electric vehicle. On the occasion, Prasar Joshi drove the Mirai from Bharat Mandapam to the residence of Nitin Gadkari, underscoring the government's commitment to advancing green hydrogen and clean mobility across the country. The Toyota Mirai, a second-generation hydrogen fuel electric vehicle, generates electricity through a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen, with only water vapor emitted as a byproduct, making it a zero-emission mobility solution. The Potato Technology Institute in Haryana's Karnal district has grown potatoes without soil. The institute has used the technology of aeroponics to grow one of India's staple crops. The method is believed to be more effective as it will prevent soil-borne diseases, ensuring healthier crops. Listen in for more information.
Potatoes, traditionally cultivated underground, are now being grown suspended in the air. Sounds incredible, but it's true. The Potato Technology Institute in Shamgarh village of Karnal district in Haryana is using aeroponics to grow this staple, without which food is hard to imagine in most parts of the world. Aeroponics is a method where nutrients are delivered as a fine mist directly to the roots. Apart from not requiring large tracts of land to grow a crop, the technique also helps prevent soil-borne diseases, ensuring healthier crops.
खेतों में जो लोग आलू लगा रहे हैं उसमें अब क्या है कि खेतों में लगाने की वजह से बार-बार वही क्रॉप लगाने की वजह से बहुत ही ज़्यादा पेस्ट डिजीज इन्फेस्टेशन जो है हमारे सॉइल में अब पाया जाने लगा है। जैसे कि स्कैब हो गया पोटैटो का, उसमें ये काफ़ी समस्या बढ़ती जा रही है। तो इन चीज़ों को जो है हमारा एरोपोनिक्स जिसे हम बोलते हैं, विदाउट द यूज ऑफ सॉइल इन द न्यूट्रिएंट सॉल्यूशन, मतलब कि भाप की तरह मिस्ट की फॉर्म में न्यूट्रिएंट्स को अप्लाई करके रूट जोन्स में, और वहां पे जो है सीड प्रोडक्शन का कार्य एरोपोनिक्स के माध्यम से हम सेंटर पे कर रहे हैं।
The institute also provides training to farmers interested in adopting this technique for potato cultivation.
कुल देखिए इसकी जो प्रायर जो चीज है, हम यहाँ पे क्या करते हैं, हमारे पास यहाँ टिश्यू कल्चर लैब है जो कि भारत सरकार से एक्रेडिटेड है। वहाँ पे हम CPRI से कल्चर ट्यूब लाके हम प्लांट्स बनाते हैं, जिसे आप आलू की पौध भी कह सकते हैं। उस पौध को फिर हम यहाँ पे ट्रांसप्लांट करते हैं अपने एरोपोनिक्स यूनिट में। यहाँ पे ट्रांसप्लांट करने के बाद पश्चात तकरीबन आप मान के चलिए कि 70-75 दिन के बाद से हमारी मिनी ट्यूबर की प्रोडक्शन शुरू हो जाती है और हम हार्वेस्टिंग करते हैं। 90 दिन तक हम यहाँ से मिनी ट्यूबर हार्वेस्ट करते हैं।
The institute has also developed a new potato variety, Kufri Uday, which matures faster, produces uniform high-quality tubers and resists common diseases.
Sports now, and American tennis great Venus Williams' warm-up before her return to Australian Open did not get off to a nice start, as she was beaten in 3 sets by Magda Linette at the Auckland Classic on Tuesday. Williams showed glimpses of the talent that has brought her 7 major singles titles before running out of steam, as the 57-ranked Linette won 6-4, 4-6, 6-2. Venus is set to make history at the Australian Open aged 45. The American will play her first Australian Open in 5 years and will be the oldest woman ever at the Melbourne tournament after being granted a wildcard. Williams will now head to Hobart for another warm-up event before the first Grand Slam of the year. Last year's Australian Open finalists Madison Keys and Aryna Sabalenka started their 2026 campaigns in style with victories at the Brisbane International. The Brisbane International is an outdoor hardcourt tournament which helps kickstart the road to the Australian Open. Defending Australian Open champion Keys earned a 6-4, 6-3 victory over McCarthy Kessler in the second round. Meanwhile, Sabalenka laid down an awesome marker with a brutal 6-0, 6-1 demolition of Kristina Buxa in the very next match. Keys and Sabalenka will clash against each other in the quarterfinals if they both win their next matches. A dominant Australia ended day 3 of the 5th Ashes Test against England at 518 for 7, taking a formidable lead of 134 runs. After Travis Head's mammoth 163, Australian skipper Steve Smith continued his team's charge with a blazing 100 at the SGG. Opening the innings, Head produced a splendid knock, looking set to complete a double ton before Jacob Bethel got him out. Marcus Labuschagne, who accompanied Head at the start of the play, was dismissed just for 2 runs shy of his half-century. Earlier in the day, England were all out for 384, with Joe Root scoring his 41st Test century. For Australia, pacer Michael Nessa took a 4-wicket haul, while Mitchell Starc and Scott Boland took 2 wickets each. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. Just scan the QR code on the screen and download the app right away. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy on Office here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.